Something that hasn't been changing as quickly, but it also has a massive impact on the education system is the broad decline of the number of American students going through higher education. And this has been happening for years. And we've seen some positive upshoots, but then some of the more recent news is negative again. So and certainly from an institutional perspective, for many institutions, this is an existential question as that enrollment continues to decline. And then broadly for the economy, what does that mean? How are we tackling the skills shortage? Because we know globally, 79% of companies are struggling to find people with the right skills. And again, ties back to CBE as well. But from an educational institution perspective, what do they need to be thinking about? What should be on their radar, and how can do you have any thoughts on how they might be able to turn things around, or at least things for them to consider?
Yeah, and I don't want to paint too broad of a stroke that's a generalization across all of the enrollment declines, but I don't think that there's any secret in the changing demographic of the average learner, and the fact that there are a lot of higher ed institutions that are just simply not listening to their customers. I mean, learners are no longer like one monolith. You can create one profile and say, this is how we serve these customers. They have very nuanced needs. And when you look at learners who have historically not been well served by traditional higher education, you have these adult learners who need flexibility, right? They have priorities like families. They work while going to school. They have maybe limited or constrained financial resources. The last statistics I saw, 29% of all undergraduate students and 77% of graduate students are over the age of 25. Okay, so think about that. These are parents. These are folks who work more than 20 hours a week. These are raising and supporting families and extended families. Then you've got the adult learners that are in the statistic of 39 million learners in the US who have some credit, but absolutely no degree, no credential to show for that. And the realization that adult learners come to employers through lots of different paths, not all of which are marked by a degree. So, which does not mean they're not skilled. It means that it's not marked by a degree. So I think that this is where skills have to come into the conversation. Even if you look at learners who are traditionally well served by the traditional HE environment, they're calling ROI into question. And they're saying, what am I going to get for these large with tuition increases? What am I going to get for these huge tuition increases for this debt that I'm going to incur? And we learn that 90% of learners go to college for a job. They go to college for employment, right? Which is not the statistic that it was 50 years ago, which there was a lot more sort of altruistic vision of education. So I think that these changing trends really call for a change in the approach to matriculate learners. And this is where skills comes in. Because when we define learning by skills and by competencies, we give learners that language to describe what they can do. And when we give them that language, we give them a currency essentially to exchange with employers. And employers, on the other side, can express their needs via the skills language as well. So taking a job description and making it skills-based. And so when we accommodate those changing needs of learners, institutions have to be thinking, number one, who are my learners? They need to be thinking learner-centric. E-commerce, retail folks think about this a lot. Higher education, I think, needs to do their soul searching on who are our learners and what do they need from us. And second, I think that they need to define their skill strategy. So how are they going to promote a learner from enrollment through a program of study with incremental signals of achievement, right? Not there's one big thing at the end, but these are learners who need incremental signals in order to get jobs, in order to get promoted before they've finished a credential. And then how do we, leave them with demonstrable, trusted credentials that can then be read by the workforce. So if we're listening to our users and they want jobs and they need jobs sooner rather than later, right? There's a different cadence that higher ed can set up to enable learners to achieve those incremental goals that they have. So I think higher ed really needs to be taking a deep look at who are their learners, what are they designing for, and then making sure that their programs fit those needs. I know that's easier said than done.
No, but yeah, well said. And there's a lot to unpack in there, but I think yeah, as you're talking, one thing that struck me was a conversation I had. Fortunately, now it was quite a few years back with a leading Australian university, who was expressing that their students were not customers, right? That those students were privileged. They had the privilege to attend that august institution. But we're seeing that change and that shift to skills across. It's always been present to a certain degree in the community college or TAFE sector here in Australia. But universities are recognizing that as well. And you talked about the 39 million individuals who are trying to crack I love the expression cracking the paper ceiling, right? They don't have that diploma, that degree. And so unfortunately, historically they'd be recognized as, or they'd have a black mark against them, and that, they didn't see it through or they didn't finish it. Whereas the model you and many and us and many others are saying, let's recognize skills as we go, credential those human skills, durable skills, 21st century skills, as well as domain specific skills all along. And there's so much great potential that it's just not, businesses aren't recognizing it. But as you said, it's also on the learner, not having that vocabulary, not having that voice or evidence to be able to put their own unique voice and share the skills that they do have and how they can really help a number of different organizations.
I think it's possible that we tend to have these conversations about higher ed and we think about 18-year-old, 19-year-old students who are coming from high school directly into a college environment. And the reality is, like, you think about the 50-year-old technologist who has worked in an actual job for 30 years, didn't get a degree, but has 30 years of experience inside of that job and then gets laid off. Like, that's a learner who does not have a paper to demonstrate that capability, but I can guarantee you likely has more impact on day one than a fresh out of college, a newly degreed learner. And there's places for both of those people, but there are use cases beyond those that are going through a more traditional path. And I think that's where, when we talk about who are the learners and how can higher ed really react to the changing demographics, those are just situations that we need to acknowledge exist. And that helps to create those paths. And you create lots of different paths to that final, whether it's a degree or a non-degree credential that allows then that person to get back into the workforce. I mean, those are really the life-changing moments for higher education.
Really, really important. And I think, we're also seeing, and I know for us as well, when we look to hire someone and we get an applicant who's fresh out of, if we need a programmer, like, okay, well, you would have learned a certain amount at college or university, or whatever the program was. But will you have that practical hands-on? Can you hit the ground running? Whereas the other example that you flagged, and that's where we are seeing boot camps being integrated into more traditional degrees, and so that very practical, competency-based, true, realistic experience. And again, for the learners to be able to validate that and demonstrate that is so important. So. Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, we could spend hours just talking about that, but I'll keep moving us on, because I'm sure we'll have to come back and read the latest on Gen AI, see what things.
It's been 15 minutes. Something has changed, so for sure.